Hey everyone, and welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling Plato's Republic. I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, this is a big one. People have been grappling with this text for
I
centuries.
mean, it's like the OG of political philosophy, right?
Pretty much. And even though it was written thousands of years ago, it's still incredibly relevant today.
So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think a good place to start is with one of the first characters Socrates encounters.
Cephalus.
Oh, yeah, Cephalus. He's the wealthy, retired old man, right?
Right. And he seems to have this contentment about him, a peace with his life that's pretty striking.
Especially when you consider how we tend to view aging today.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, what would a society that valued that kind of inner peace over, say, endless productivity even look like?
It's a question worth considering, that's for sure. But Plato doesn't let us linger on that too long before things take a more, shall we say, philosophical turn.
Right. Enter Thrasymachus, who throws a bit of a wrench in the works.
Yeah. Thrasymachus is definitely not afraid to stir the pot. So what does he bring to the table?
Well, he challenges this whole idea of rulers as these benevolent caretakers of the people.
He's basically like, come on, are we really expected to believe that those in power are just looking out for everyone else?
Exactly. He suggests that maybe, just maybe, they're motivated by a hunger for power. That good old-fashioned lust for control.
It's a question that has echoed throughout history, hasn't it?
For sure. Think about it. How often do those in positions of authority genuinely prioritize the needs of the people they govern over their own ambitions?
It's a tough one. And this is where that whole idea of nolo episcopari comes into play.
Ah, yes. The idea that the most just individuals might actually avoid leadership roles altogether.
Because if they're not in it for the power, what's the motivation?
Exactly. The truly just might shy away from such positions, because true leadership, according to Plato, demands immense sacrifice and a willingness to prioritize the collective good above personal gain.
That's a pretty tall order. So we've got this tension between power and justice. And to explore this tension further, Plato introduces us to this radical vision, a blueprint for what he calls the ideal republic.
Right. And this ideal republic is founded on the principle of specialization, each citizen playing a specific role.
A role based on their natural talents and abilities. So we're talking about a society with philosopher kings, artisans, guardians, all working together.
Exactly. Each part contributing to the harmony of the whole.
It's like he's building this intricate clockwork society, with each part perfectly calibrated. But here's the thing. Plato gets into some pretty controversial ideas about how to actually maintain this ideal republic.
Oh, absolutely. One area where this becomes very clear is in his ideas about art and storytelling.
Yeah, think about artistic freedom today. Plato would probably flip. He had some pretty strict ideas about what kind of stories were okay, especially for young ears.
It's true. He was wary of the power of art to influence people, particularly young minds.
Like, can you imagine a world without any of those crazy myths about Zeus?
Well, Plato believed that even fictional accounts of gods behaving badly could corrupt the youth. He felt it undermined the moral foundation of the Republic.
Interesting. So art should serve a higher purpose then.
Exactly. One that reinforced virtue and encouraged good behavior.
Makes you wonder what he'd think of today's reality TV.
Right.
Okay, so we've got censorship of art, but hold on because it gets even wilder.
Wilder. How so?
Plato throws out this concept of the noble lie.
Ah, yes. The noble lie. The idea that someone's a little, let's say, bending of the truth might be necessary for the greater good.
Wait, so Plato is suggesting that it's okay for leaders to lie to the people.
Not exactly lie, more like present a carefully constructed narrative.
That's still misleading though, right?
Well, he argued that sometimes the masses might not grasp the complexities of truth.
And a simplified story, even if it's not entirely accurate, could help maintain order.
In essence, yes. But it's definitely a tricky concept. Who gets to decide what's a noble lie? Where do we draw the line?
It's a slippery slope, for sure. And we still grapple with this today, right? I mean, think about propaganda or even just those little white lies we tell to avoid conflict.
Exactly. It's all connected to this idea that sometimes a carefully curated story, even if it's not entirely true, can be a powerful tool.
It's like we're hardwired to believe in stories, even when we know they might be too good to be true.
And that's precisely why Plato placed such a strong emphasis on education. He didn't just see it as memorizing facts, but as cultivating the ability to discern truth from falsehood.
Being able to think critically, to question what you're told.
Exactly. And this leads us to one of the most famous metaphors in philosophy, Plato's allegory of the cave.
Ah, yes, the cave. Always loved this one. So paint us a picture. What's going on in this cave?
All right, so imagine you're chained in a cave, and all you've ever known are the shadows dancing on the wall.
Okay, I'm there, chained up, staring at shadows. What next?
And those shadows, they represent the limitations of our perception when we rely solely on our senses.
We're trapped in this limited perspective, mistaking shadows for reality.
Exactly. And then, one day, someone breaks free. They climb out of the cave into the blinding sunlight.
Into the real world.
Precisely. And for the first time, they see the world as it truly is, illuminated by the sun, which represents knowledge and enlightenment.
Okay, so they've seen a light, literally. What happens when they go back to tell the others?
Well, that's the catch, isn't it? They try to explain what they've seen, but the others just think they're crazy.
Because they haven't experienced that higher reality for themselves.
Exactly. So the question becomes, how do we break free from our own metaphorical caves? How do we know when we're clinging to shadows and when we're embracing the light of truth?
That's a question for the ages. It's a lot like what we were talking about with the noble lie, right? Yeah. How do we know who to trust, what to believe?
Exactly. It's a call to constant self-reflection, to question our assumptions, to seek a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
To keep striving for that light, even if it's hard to see sometimes.
Absolutely. And speaking of challenging norms, Plato had some pretty radical ideas about another group often left in the shadows, women.
Oh, yeah. For someone living in ancient Greece, his views on gender roles were pretty surprising. So what did Plato have to say about the women?
Well, in his Ideal Republic, Plato argued that women should receive the same education and training as men.
Whoa. Really? He was advocating for complete equality.
He believed that women were equally capable of reason and virtue and should have the opportunity to cultivate those qualities to their fullest potential.
So we're talking about women warriors, women philosophers, women rulers, the whole 9 yards.
Precisely. He envisioned a society where leadership and intellectual pursuits weren't limited by gender, but by merit and ability.
Which, let's be honest, is a concept that still sparks debate today.
Sadly, yes. But it speaks to this core belief that Plato had. The idea that the soul itself has no gender, that the capacity for reason and virtue transcends those categories.
It's all about the soul. And speaking of the soul, we have to dive into Plato's tripartite theory.
Yes. The 3 parts of the soul. The appetitive, the spirited, and the rational.
Okay, so break that down for me. What do those even mean?
All right, imagine this. You're trying to decide whether to have that extra slice of cake. That's your appetitive soul, driven by desire and pleasure, urging you to indulge.
Oh man, I know that feeling well.
Then there's your spirited soul, fueled by ambition, courage, and a desire for recognition. They might be telling you to resist the cake, to show willpower.
It's like the angel and devil on your shoulders, each one whispering in your ear.
Exactly. And then there's the rational soul, the voice of reason and logic, which might step in and say, hey, 1 slice is enough. Let's think about this.
So it's about finding that balance, that harmony between our desires, our ambitions, and our ability to reason.
Precisely. For Plato, a virtuous and fulfilling life depends on the rational soul governing the other 2.
Not suppressing those desires or ambitions completely, but making sure they don't run the show.
Exactly. And when those desires and ambitions rule unchecked by reason, we're more likely to experience inner conflict, unhappiness, and make choices that aren't in our best interest.
We've all been there. So how does this idea of the tripartite soul, this internal struggle, play out on a larger scale?
That's a great question. And it leads us into one of the darker, more cautionary aspects of Plato's Republic, his outline of the different forms of government.
Right. He wasn't a fan of every form of government.
Definitely not. He outlines a series of deteriorating forms, each mirroring a different aspect of the human soul. He starts with timocracy, ruled by those driven by honor and ambition, much like the spirited part of the soul. Then we have oligarchy, where the wealthy and powerful reign, mirroring the appetitive soul's desire for material gain.
Okay, those make sense. But then how does he get to democracy? We usually think of democracy as a good thing, right? So I've got these forms of government, each with their own flaws. But what makes democracy so bad in Plato's eyes?
Well, he saw it as inherently unstable. While democracy emphasizes individual freedom, Plato worried it could easily devolve into mob rule.
Mob rule, huh? Sounds a little dramatic, doesn't it?
Maybe, but think about it. Decisions being driven by fleeting desires, emotional appeals rather than reasoned debate.
Okay, I see where he's coming from. It's like he's suggesting that too much freedom without the grounding of, wisdom and virtue can actually be dangerous.
Exactly. And this, according to Plato, paves the way for the most corrupt form of government.
Tyranny.
Tyranny ruled by a single, all-powerful individual. It doesn't get much worse than that, right?
Not in Plato's book. He saw the tyrant as a figure consumed by their own unchecked desires and paranoia.
A person completely enslaved by their own worst impulses. Exactly. And he even did this interesting calculation, claiming that a tyrant is actually 729 times less happy than a philosopher king.
729 times. Wow, that's a whole lot of unhappiness. You'd think with all that power they'd be on top of the world.
Right. But Plato is saying that true happiness, true fulfillment, doesn't come from external power or wealth.
It's about that inner harmony, that balance we were talking about earlier, where reason guides our actions and our desires.
Precisely. It's not about denying our desires or ambitions, but ensuring that they align with reason.
So we're back to this idea of the good life. It's about finding that balance within ourselves and then creating a society that reflects that balance.
Exactly. And for Plato, that means a society where those who are most fit to lead are the ones who are guided by reason and wisdom, not by a lust for power or material gain.
It's a pretty tall order, but even if we can't achieve this perfectly balanced republic, Plato gives us a lot to think about, right?
Absolutely. He challenges us to examine our own beliefs about power, justice, even our own internal landscape.
It's about striving for that inner harmony, that pursuit of knowledge and truth, even if it's a lifelong journey.
Exactly. And along the way, we might just create a slightly more just and fulfilling world for ourselves and for others.
Well said. So there you have it, Deep Divers, a whirlwind tour through Plato's Republic. We covered a lot of ground today. Justice, power, education, the soul, even the role of art. It's a lot to digest, but hopefully it sparks some new ideas and insights for you.
It's a conversation that's been going on for centuries, and it's one that's still relevant today. So keep those questions coming, keep those discussions going.
Because in the end, isn't that what Plato would have wanted? To get us thinking, talking, and maybe even disagreeing about the big questions?
Exactly. As long as we're engaging with those questions, we're on the right track.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So until next time, keep asking those big questions, deep divers, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.